Dear ladies and gentlemen, allow me to start our panel. It's dedicated to energy. It's going to be dedicated to the broad range of issues related to energy. Allow me to introduce our panelists. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Ilya Ponomarev on behalf of the Russian Federation. Mr. Paul Shapiro, senior banker from EBRD. Mr. Yuriy Vitrenko, representative of Naftogaz Ukraine, and Richard Spinks, CEO of Activa Energy Group. And I would like to start this panel discussion and invite to the floor Mr. Paul Shapiro. Today, Ukraine has really faced the number of very complex energy-related problems. But undoubtedly, however, we are moving forward slowly, but step by step. We're trying to find solutions, and we are no longer dependent that much on the Russian gas. But anyways, there are so many problems in our energy sector that still remain, and it's important not only to get moral support, but also investment and financial support from our European partners. What are the priorities, in your view, today, when we talk about investment in the Ukraine's energy sector? What can you see as something really important that needs to be developed?
I don't know if the one in front of us work as well. Presuming not. Where do you start? As we used to say, do you want the whole list or just the top 10? There's a few clear deliverables that need to be moved along. The independent regulator has been long awaited. Regulatory law has been passed, but it's been a standoff between the presidential administration and the prime minister, the government passed. Maybe that is unlocked, but will they be truly independent? Because with all these things, it's one thing to take the steps that have been suggested, but then you're going to actually see what it's really like to live with it. And how good are they going to be? It's a sine qua non, they have to be independent, but they also have to be fully capable, to have any credibility in the market, to be able to keep order. Without that, it's very hard to see how a lot of investors would be willing to come in, not knowing that they will be able to move product, be able to get a fair price for it, and so forth. The second, which I would say is top priority, is to finally follow through with the unbundling. It's been a long and, in some ways, confused discussion. I say confused because they grouped in what they would do with the upstream companies into the discussion, and that was meant to be a separate topic. That now we have firm advice from the Energy Community Secretariat that really should not be the case. But we haven't gotten to the hard part yet. The easy part is deciding on what the system should look like, how it should be unbundled. That's not a hard decision. What's a really hard decision are the things that nobody has got to grips with. And this goes back quite much to what the previous panel was saying on privatization. Do you know what you're going to be buying? You're looking to attract a partner into it. Do you know what they have? Now, from the company itself, I understand, they have all kinds of assets that really are just a burden to maintain, that do nothing for the system. And I'm not talking about the usual owning a football club or a dairy farm or other social assets. I'm talking about actual parts of the infrastructure that they by law are not permitted to shut down, close, rationalize, and it's an enormous burden. Now, how do you honestly expect anyone to invest in a company when they're saddled with us around their necks? Maybe it's another company. If you really want to claim that these are sacred assets and they must be kept at all costs, then fine, make an additional company, a caretaker company. maybe a separate division of the state property fund. They'll do nothing but pay to maintain and keep these assets. They also have a question of, can you do what you want? Let's say you're now the new proud owner of a co-op. Can you really do what you want with it? Are you ready for that? You know, a lot of these assets are things that people might buy if they really thought they could dispose of what they didn't want it. A lot of these things are real estate deals. I mean, this happened a lot throughout the early years of the whole transformation, but not in Ukraine, where you have enormous factories in the middle of town. It's a real estate deal. You don't actually want the company. You don't actually want to run the company. And yet here in the energy sector, we have companies that absolutely have to run. They provide essential public services. The number of employees, nobody wants to talk about this problem. But the level of underemployment, even at these very, very poor wages, that level is still vastly high. Just by parallel reasoning, we had someone take over the state oil company in Albania. They honestly needed 200 people to do what 5,000 people were employed to do. This is just, I'm not saying the numbers apply the same way here, but to give you some idea of the scale and magnitude of the problem. So maintaining services, maintaining employment, you know, these are as important things to remember, will also have to be resolved at the same time as you're trying to solve your energy requirements. And who is brave enough to get to grips with that? Who wants to come in with all the other risks you all know about? I'm not going to bore you with the usual litany of corruption and side deals and impossibility of getting anything done with the low levels of institutional capability. You know all those things. If on top of that, it's a very difficult business proposition, are you really going to come and pay good money to do that? To be part of that? Would you use your own money? So, to some extent, we're going to have to fix first before you can have any hopes of selling anything. And that includes in the energy sector. And you're going to have to build the management teams, you're going to have to rationalize, you're going to have to take this pain over a little bit of time. But if you're going to have any chance to actually sell one of these companies, to get people in it, as opposed to simply building from scratch, building for new. If you're really going to get somebody interested in trying to fix the old, you're going to have to make an interesting proposition, fair game, and you have to accept that it's going to take time. There are no quick fixes for these things.
Thank you very much for your optimism and your support. I would like to invite to the word Mr. Spinks. Mr. Spinks, I know that you have a rich experience working in Central and Eastern Europe, including widespread group states and Russia, of course. And it's worth noting that Mr. Spinks is a pioneer in the technology progress for energy industry. And I'd like to ask you, what is your vision, the perspective of development alternative energy in Ukraine? Thank you.
I think the parallel is, sorry, good afternoon those who are still here. I think the parallel is a little bit similar to Poland when I first went there in 88, 9, when I had a big telephone in a briefcase, which was a mobile phone in England, yet I had a tiny Motorola phone when I got to Warsaw in 1990. And the fact was that it was simply better, and actually some of the things that Paul said ring true here. It was simply better to do things from zero, from scratch. Sometimes it just is better to do that and let things die. Let businesses collapse and perhaps do it again. Or if not, if you have technology, and we do in some areas, wait for those businesses to fold and then pick up what assets you require once they are clean. So my view is you have a great opportunity. I think you have a hugely underutilised base of raw material in Ukraine, which is what I want to talk about. In fact, if I go quickly, I didn't know, I've got probably 7 minutes, and my presentation only takes an hour. So I'll go quickly and I'll show you some of the things I think we can do in Ukraine that might be a little bit more optimistic than some of you, some other speakers earlier today were speaking about. So we're all about forestry to energy. We've done it before, and we're going to do it here in Ukraine. So this is what we think we can do as our small company. We're going to skip through lots of slides because there's too many. This gives you a breakdown. We all know what's going on in the world. We all have TV, Google. We know that coal is now the devil, and 5 years ago it was wonderful. We now know that coal usage across Europe, United States, Canada, and other places is being significantly dented by regulations, by the populations of countries. We saw demonstrations in Europe's largest coal mine over the weekend, with people in gas masks or white suits climbing on equipment, closing them down. We've seen regulations in the United Kingdom with coal and carbon taxes, closing down coal fire stations. We've seen in Alberta 6 months ago, the last place on earth and the only country to leave Kyoto, now saying there will be no coal being burnt in Alberta for power, which every coal-fired power company I met 9 months ago in Alberta laughed me out of their office when I said that this would happen. So we're seeing coal being demonised, and largest coal company in the world, Chapter 11, Peabody. Hargreaves in the United Kingdom, share price down, I don't want to pick a number, but I believe over 70% in the last 12 months. Coal is in trouble. In Ukraine, we used to have a lot of coal. Well, we still have a lot of coal, but we used to use a lot of coal from the east of Ukraine. Clearly, and I was speaking to one of the larger traders today, about an hour and a half ago, who now is not trading coal. His business is over after 25 years as being one of the largest coal traders, because simply the problems that are there mean that that's no longer an option. My personal view on the coal situation in Ukraine is it simply would have died anyway as a business, because I believe that Ukraine is going to be pushed and forced to align itself with other Western countries. When I say Western, I've lived here for nearly on and off for 20 odd years, so I consider myself to be a little bit genetically modified. So I refer to those countries which we see on the news who are closing down coal being the more developed nations, alongside which we are one in Ukraine. The growth in investment in renewable energies has been dramatic. This is the second round of green energy investments. It kind of false started about 8-9 years ago, and it went quiet, and then suddenly the whole planet's decided that we need to have clean air and use renewable energy. So you can read the slides if you wish as I go. I won't read the obvious. This is where we see it going. It's not only where we see it going, it's where far smarter people than us see it going in the investment community, and it's immense, it's huge. We don't need all of that at Active Energy Group, we need a little bit, and Ukraine doesn't need all of that either. In fact, we're going to need far less in Ukraine than they'll need in other countries, as you'll see in a moment. This is what we're seeing, is that the investment is increasing dramatically, technologies are moving forward, and the costs of this energy are dropping dramatically. Solar is a case in point. In the United Kingdom, our government there almost bankrupted every single solar company 2.5–3 years ago when they dropped the tariff by 50%, and ships full of solar panels that were costing 4, 5, 6 times what they cost today were halfway across the ocean and never got installed. They were being sent back and companies were going into liquidation. Now look at the costs, and the cost of energy is very low from some of these types of technologies, which even 2 years ago I would have said I wouldn't have invested in, including wind and solar. And but we don't do that, we do something different. Here's what we do. We have a holding company in the UK, we're a publicly listed company, we're not very big, we're what Paul here would describe probably as a micro-cap business. Our market cap's about $40 million. Hopefully it will not stay there for very long. If we look at some of the projects that we have divisions in those countries, they do different things. In Ukraine, we focus on biomass. on a very low level of production, but we do produce. We do employ lots of people. We do give business to the logistics operators in this country, and we work with forestries in great numbers. Over 126 forestries work with us on a daily basis. We're also the largest buyer and producer of timber products now in Ukraine, and we're the largest producer of wood chip in Europe, which is quite an achievement in just 3 years from a standing start. And I say that not to blow our own trumpet, but to say that if anyone here is thinking about investing in Ukraine and keeps being told that they shouldn't, for whatever negative reason, or that it's a bad time, or that you can't do well here, you can. And in fact, now is a really good time to be doing something, because there's not much competition. Because most people are thinking what you've been told, and that's they shouldn't do anything. But they're wrong, you should be doing things. So this is what we do. We start out with forest management. We work with forestry owners in different countries, at the moment in Canada, and we're about to start in Ukraine, to help them to improve the efficiency with which they operate, first of all. Second thing we do is we start with early stage processing of wood, and then we move, eventually when the volumes are there, through making something simple and getting the efficiencies in the forestry, we then start using all of the tree rather than leaving waste or burning it in the fields, and we turn it into a fuel. Our next step, and this is, I'm going to give you something interesting to think about to answer the question again that was given at the beginning, is power stations in Ukraine were never interested in biomass. The reason was the same owners own the biomass as own the coal. If you own the coal and you own a coal-fired power plant that didn't cost you very much, perhaps you didn't build from scratch because it was there in the 60s or the 70s, why on earth would you invest hundreds of millions of dollars to turn it into something cleaner? You wouldn't, especially if you were being subsidised heavily for coal. That was your coal in the first place. What's happened now is that the coal is now largely unavailable, lots of imports are coming in, the plants are getting very old, and the profits being generated from lower priced electricity mean that it's almost impossible for the owner of these coal plants to actually reinvest. What our fuel does is it means that we can actually put biomass directly into a coal-fired power plant. No one else can do it at 100%. We reliably do it over 50% in a number of locations, including Utah in the United States at the moment. What does that mean? It means that if these power plants close in different countries, and they are closing, I saw 2 last week in Italy, in fact 3 days ago, it means we are the only company that could technically come and take them over and start them again completely cleanly as a renewable power plant without rebuilding them, without having to build from scratch, and without having to invest in a retrofit. So this puts us in a very powerful position. What does that mean for Ukraine? It means, and I'll skip these, this is, by the way, how we built our business in Ukraine in the last 3 years, and I was saying that it can be done. I'm going fast, because I think I've got about 3 minutes. We now produce this year around just over 500,000 tonnes of wood chip. We don't use good quality wood, we use the stuff that nobody else wants, and we're about to start using even the pure waste. So this is the kind of growth you can do, you can see in Ukraine if you work hard. Let me go through. This group here are an example of what I'd like to see happening in Ukraine. These people are not Ukrainian. They are actually indigenous people. They're from a group called the Métis, and they have settlements in Alberta. They own 1.5 million hectares of land. About 500,000 of that is forestry. They have no government support. They have 90% unemployment. They have no schooling or education, or didn't have. They have no medical care to any great degree on their own settlements and have to travel a day in each direction to get to a doctor, for example. That's no longer the case. We spent 7 years fighting with them to get them in a position where forestry, which they own, can be used to produce an environmentally friendly fuel to put into Alberta power stations that currently burn coal. It suits their lifestyle, it suits their culture, and it's wonderful for Alberta as well as for the Métis, who were marginalised but are now, because of this, being invited into more closely into the community. That gives you an idea of how it works. I'm going to do one more slide and then stop. There's the numbers in Alberta with our Métis partners. Now I'm going to show you the Ukrainian example. And by the way, my personal belief and my financistów тоже думаю that in Ukraine you have 35 to $50 billion of assets that are unrealized, that we know how to monetize, because the numbers here are not speculative. We have received, we are completed due diligence, all but, I'm going to get off this stage in about 25 minutes to go for a call with our bankers, for up to $300 million of investment secured on that forest. And it's only 458,000 hectares. Ukraine has in excess of 9 million. So this is what we are planning in Ukraine at the moment. We hope to achieve this year between 350 and 900,000 hectares in a managed partnership in some form of, I won't go into details because I'll be giving the game away, and it costs a lot of money to restructure legal structures in Ukraine to be able to do this. Hectares of forestry, which we can work with those forestries, invest in those forestries, and generate a replacement for coal for Ukraine. And we expect probably nearer the $500 million level of investment to be secured against that brand new, not restructured business in Ukraine, and to employ probably upwards of 2,500 people by 2018. So this is what we do. We take wood, we turn it into this. There's the details of it. It's exactly the same as coal, but better in some areas. It's exactly the same energy. It burns better. It's competitive on price. It's low in sulfur. It does all the things that you want a fuel to do, but it can go in a coal plant. I think that's the end of where I'm at. But, yeah, there's all these. I'll flip through them. Oh, there's some other examples, but we won't talk about those. So the bottom line is that we are very optimistic about Ukraine for all kinds of reasons. We always have been. For which reason you should take everything I've just said with a pinch of salt, because clearly I'm overly optimistic. But we've done very well in Ukraine over the years, and we think that Ukraine is a great place to do business for those people who are willing to work hard and understand and to spend their time here, a lot of time. And I think renewables now is a great time to be doing business.
Thank you very much for your illustrative presentation, but I would like one small question for you. Okay. According to the European directive, about 15% alternative energy should be in the energy European balance. But now Ukraine have in her balance only 2%. About your vision this situation, does Ukrainian government do enough to radically change this situation? What should be done in this direction, first of all?
I'm really the wrong person to ask that question, because there's a man who works with me sitting there and knows far more about the detail of that than I do. But what I would say is that compared to Alberta and Canada, where you would expect things to be far simpler, more transparent and easier to do, this project has so far taken us, since the last conference when we first said we would get into this project, 1 year. In Alberta, it's taken me 7 years. So I would suggest to you that, and by the way, everything that I'm talking about, is achievable in very reasonable timescales, and we're already investing and have been for some time in this program. So I believe that, I'm going to have to say, I'm sure more could be done, but nothing has not been done that affects us in a negative way.
Thank you.
I would like to give the floor to Mr. Vitrenko, and I would like to ask you the following kind of psychological question. There is such psychological definition. In case there is a problem, we have to talk about it. Or sometimes we talk and talk only. And we are talking about reducing charges and rental payments for extracting natural gas. And lots of experts are talking about it, and lots of discussions are happening about it. And we talked a lot about it, but changes are not visible until now. And from another standpoint, a lot of investors are complaining that rules of the game are changing pretty quickly in the natural gas market, and it's hard to adjust to all these changes and tune in to these changes. And this is the motivating factor for major players for them to come into Ukraine. Your vision, what have to be done within this context? And what is the price for not doing whatever we have?
If you don't mind, I will switch into English, because as far as I understand, the major kind of part of the audience is supposed to be at least foreign investors, and that's why maybe they would prefer me speaking English. First of all, I would like to point out that there were some significant changes this year about the royalties or subsoil tax. It was decreased from the level of 55%, memory doesn't fail me, to 29% for all the private or so-called independent producers. And even for Ukrgaz Vodobывание, a state-owned company, it was decreased from 70% to 50%. So again, we can see some progress. Of course, one would mention that basically the rent or this royalty tax just decreased to the previous level. So it was increased and then decreased back. So it's not like it is really decreased. Given that we see the gas prices going down and oil prices going down, it's a good thing for the economy. But of course, for investors in gas production and oil production, it means that they probably expect a further decrease in royalty tax. We as Naftogaz point out that we really need to develop local production because we want to achieve complete independence from any gas imports as of 2020. And in order to achieve it, first of all, we need to increase production, like by 30%, and decrease consumption roughly by the same number. In order to decrease production by 30%, we should invest much more, and we should attract, again, investors into this sector. That means that the royalty tax should be further decreased, and we even suggested that there should be like a 0% royalty tax for all the new licenses. And the state can, again, get necessary proceeds or income for the state budget through the transparent and competitive sale of the licenses through auctions, rather than through, again, some subsoil tax or additional profit tax, whatever. And we think that in such a way, people will invest more in gas production. The government will have more in terms of value-added tax, standard profit tax, and again, they will have an additional revenue stream from selling licenses. That's about this particular issue of taxation. In terms of changing rules, of course I agree that there should be some consistency and stability, but if we are talking about radical reforms and we are talking about some very bad practice that we used to have in the past, probably again changing it is a good thing. And investors, at least I have the understanding that they were expecting for these changes, they have been expecting for these changes for the last 2 decades at least. So probably it's about time to start doing something, not just continue talking about necessary reforms. And that is why, again, I mean, taxation should be changed. We should continue to create an efficient gas market in Ukraine. We should give a credit to the previous government and to the current government that they're doing something. We do think that it's not enough, but at least we should recognize the achievements. For example, since the last conference, we can now say that we have the at least a single price for all the household needs. It means for municipal heating enterprises and for regional distribution companies. It decreases arbitrage opportunities, or simply speaking, corruption. It also, again, makes the whole market more attractive for international investors because the market gets much bigger. If previously they were able to sell only to industrial consumers, and it was just like, let's say, 1/3 of the market, so now that they can sell it to the entire market. Also, for example, speaking of unbundling, at least there is a very clear plan as suggested by Energy Community Secretariat, and we understand that there is a consensus among all the international partners of Ukraine, including guys like Paul from EBRD and again other important stakeholders. We as Naftogaz fully support this plan, and we're ready to start realizing this plan tomorrow. Of course, the government should approve it, but at least now we have this consensus. So we spent again 1 year on not very productive discussions, unfortunately, but finally again we have a consensus. Also, for example, I can mention that the gas market law adopted last year was at least partially implemented. So we have some secondary legislation supporting this market development in certain aspects. In certain aspects is counterproductive. So, for example, unfortunately, we failed to implement European network codes because they were not obligatory for Ukraine, and nobody was pushing for that. But it's very difficult to implement one thing or one part of the European kind of, how to say, market design, and to forget about the other part, which makes the first part not efficient. Also, I would mention in terms of, again, some positive developments over the last year, that finally we got rid of at least critical dependence on Russian gas supplies. Again, this winter we lived without Russian gas supplies, and we were perfectly fine. We were able to secure even a lower price than offered by Russians. It also, again, makes the whole market more sustainable, I would put it this way. So, just to sum it up, I think that, again, we have to change a lot. We have to be much faster and much more radical or fundamental about these changes. But at the same time, again, there is at least some progress that should encourage investors, if not to invest, but at least to be very careful about not losing opportunities, and again, thinking about the right time to enter this market to reap the advantages of like a first mover, and just again a reasonable yet agile investor. Thank you.
And an investor. Thank you very much for your response. I'm not going to ask questions, but I'm pretty sure that audience will ask you questions. So I would like to give the floor to Mr. Ponomarev. But I would like to start this discussion with a short remark. The energy policy of Ukraine was more focused on our internal problems, natural gas price, to extract more natural gas. So it was basically about internal, domestic policy. As of today, energy policy of Ukraine is targeted towards international arena. For the first time, we attracted EU as a mediator in the conflict with the energy policy. And for the first time, this is the issue discussed at the international, and there is discussion about Nord Stream 2. That's not only EU problem and Ukrainian problem, but it's more global problem. But getting back to Ukrainian problems, messages from Russia that they are ready to stop transit natural gas via Ukraine, and they are planning to do it. They are playing game, or they are blackmailing, or these are very sophisticated geopolitical game. How it impacts investment climate now, and how you can see the solution of this problem. Thank you very much. I think this statement about internal focus of the policy or international focus of this policy, it's somewhat some kind of exaggeration. So it's internationally focused. It used to be. And previously, Ukraine was oriented towards Russia as a source of energy. Now the orientation is towards Europe. But the bottom line is the same. And my view about it, it's related to Nord Stream 2. And my opinion is somewhat different, that's Russian project aiming at alternative route, when we talk about Ukraine. You see, even Nord Stream 1 is not utilized 100%. Gazprom is having problem with selling natural gas. And Gazprom is trying to get whatever they tried. They managed even to increase supply of natural gas. But the government policy in Russia, it's due to political problems. The markets, they are losing. The Southern Stream is not working. And they were bluffing about construction of pipeline via Turkey, and it's not working, and Gazprom is facing very difficult situation. And who is utilizing, getting the benefits out of it? Germany. And they have initiative in construction of Nord Stream 2. That's the only rational cause that explains the construction, because Germany is trying to get around Ukraine with respect to supplying natural gas. When Nord Stream 2 will be constructed, I have doubts about it. So Germany will be monopoly in distribution of Russian natural gas, not only Russian natural gas. This infrastructure is very much related to German infrastructure, and Germany is getting stronger as political leader and energy leader as well, and changing just this status. I don't think there will be something entirely new. So Germany is more predictable player than Russia, and I doubt that Germany will use this status to apply as a geopolitical weapon, as my country was doing it. But they will use this monopoly status. I think that's a medical fact. How we can overcome this problem? I'm pretty sure that main problem in Ukraine, it's not about transit. It's pretty understandable source of revenues. The main issue is to extract more natural gas, to extract more oil and natural gas, and as well processing it. We know that most of the plants are stopped, and all these problems with royalties actually scared investors who were ready to come to Ukraine after Maidan, and they were ready to invest into the assets in Ukraine. And privatization is not really developing in any way. At least we don't have clear signs for potential investors how privatization will happen. And so there is no investment cloud around the country. And plus, tradition developed within the last 25 years that Ukraine have not utilized geological capacities that Ukraine is having. I mean natural gas and other capacities. And the players were utilizing the capacities and technologies inherited from Soviet periods of time. And even there were attempts to get back to the level of extraction of natural gas achieved in the 70s. And that's not the problem and the issue of Naftogaz. Naftogaz was trying to do its best in this particular case. That's the problem of the government that is supposed to develop this system and to make sure that a lot of small and medium-sized companies that are utilizing the wells and extracting natural gas and involving all the assets and developing investment profile of Ukraine. And the last thing I just wanted to mention, it's about privatization. There are lots of different constraints, restrictions, and lots of rational and irrational thinking about it. And Ukernafta, it's a small oil company. Why this company is not sold? Naftogaz.
A huge amount of right things they're doing, the right things they say, and a good strategy related to developing the natural gas market. Somewhere it works better, somewhere it works worse, but it's actually the upstream issue and preparing the companies for sale. This preparation is not visible in the market yet. Maybe somebody else can actually argue with that, but in the market one can hardly see that at all. And there is an impression even that there is a desire to keep those things under operational control. I mean, those assets under operational control. This is what I think we need to do first. So as far as I understand, you're right. So lack of prolongation of the transiting contract by 2019, this is a political bluffing from Russia. And there is no alternative whatsoever to the Ukrainian gas transit system. Yuriy Vitrenko wanted to say something about it, didn't you? I only wanted to comment starting from the upstream, and you actually made a public announcement of we just made an announcement that the state needs to consider the opportunity of Ukregaz Dobycha, which is the upstream national company, not only by attracting the foreign direct investors, but from the standpoint of developing the Ukrainian stock exchange. We cannot build an effective market economy without the capital market, because this is the driver of the economic development. We're not going to have any market economy unless we successfully build the capital markets, because the ag market or meat markets have been not there for years, since the times of feudalism. Unlike it is, well, this is the difference of the market economy from communism, that there is capital market available. So we can make a conclusion. Since we don't have any capital market, you can make a conclusion what kind of country we have. In order to give Ukregaz, the national upstream company, for privatization and involving such anchor investors as EBRD, we need to have these assets prepared. Because historically, these assets have faced a lot of corruption. They're using outdated technology that would be not yet clear for the investors. They're selling the goods that are set voluntarily by the state, and it's 15 times below the market. So the issue of entering the system, the pressures, this is all not settled. This is so intransparent. It is impossible to sell such an asset. Because I used to work in the International Investment Bank in London, in London, so I do realize how companies get sold, and I realize what we have in our Ukrainian agenda. So our objective is actually to make these quality assets, to prepare them, to actually make them clear for the investors, to make it transparent, to fight corruption and make an effective market so that the investors could understand what kind of environment they're going to work with. It has to do not only with the upstream company, but with whatever company you meet. And then there's a question for the government when to decide on the privatization of the given companies. For Ukr-Nafta, the situation is a little bit different because there is a minoritarian shareholder who is actually having a very ambiguous reputation. So actually to let the major shares sold for reasonable money, this will be complicated. I think the state will have to solve the problem with that shareholder, or actually state the financial damages. This is a question to the law enforcement, to the courts, regarding how effective it may be. With regards to transit through Ukraine, unfortunately we can see that there is a targeted policy pursued by the Russian Federation to omit Ukraine, to go all the way around Ukraine. And there's a high probability that starting from 2020, there will be no Russian gas supplied through the Ukrainian territory. And we reflect that in our decisions for the tariff setting and many other issues. We're not just moaning about this. Yes, we've found a proper response to Gazprom to their attempts to go to omit Ukraine. From the technical standpoint, the Nord Stream 1 has not been used for its full capacity due to one single reason, because it's going to a pump pipeline, and there are legislative restrictions to use that pipeline by the Gazprom. Only by 50% it is allowed to be used, and therefore this actually limits the Nord Stream advantage at its full capacity, despite the fact it's lucrative for them to sell more natural gas, and they are ready to come up, to accept the Energy Package 3, they still prefer to sell less and not to be in line with Energy Package 3, which is talking too much about the Gazprom policy in the European market. As for the Nord Stream 2, it was interesting to listen to your point of view that it's an interest of Germany, and Germany openly announces that they have economic benefits and is a commercially beneficial project for them. But the problem is that there is no economic feasibility for Russia. This is a purely political project for Russia, which is actually aimed at depriving Ukraine of transit money, and they want to do everything possible for the Ukrainian gas to cost maybe even more than it costs in Germany, and make the Ukrainian economy not competitive enough, and give actually this geopolitical punishment to the countries who were daring to actually break their relationship with the empire. This is our perception of this current agenda, because yes, there are rational arguments in Germany, but whereas there are no in Russia, because this is a purely political motivated thing. I would like to finish my comment with something positive by saying that we got rid of this critical dependency on the Russian Federation. And now when I'm talking to this, yes, this is a financial issue for me. Yes, a lot of money is bidding. I'm now sure that nobody will get frozen in Ukraine because of no Russian gas. Any of the private investors who are upstreaming the natural gas will not be really concerned about it, which makes the country's entire economy more sustainable and more attractive, obviously, for the foreign investors. This is what we managed to achieve for the last year, I would say. Thank you very much. The organizers are showing that we have 5 more minutes to go. I know that energy is a very energetic issue, and of course I would like to say a couple of words in response to your statement, and I would also encourage 2 questions from the audience, please. Yes, really, I will be just saying 2 sentences. What you are talking about regarding Ukr, the upstream company, and Ukr-Nafta, I think this is not the way the state's supposed to do it. Just let the private investors sort it out with Kolomoisky. It's going to be much cheaper for the state. But with the upstream company, killing corruption 100%, you can kill it 100% over there, but it's not going to rescue the market. Corruption is everywhere, not only there. Even if you make an ideally transparent domestic company, people will still put that in doubt anyway. Why doing that? Let the private investor do that. The private investor, from our Russian experience when we were selling the most poorly managed assets, they're still better managed by the corporate people rather than the state. Energy is not, it's just a simple thing. I think we can talk more about this during the networking opportunity. I'd like to now give the Q&A chance for the audience. But very briefly, please. Thank you. Around a year ago, I had a meeting with Rebecca Harms, well, a renowned European member of parliament, and when I asked her about the profitability of green energy projects, she said that this is a political decision. Ukraine is now surviving the war, and there are corruption-related problems, economic crisis. Ukraine has no money to implement such green projects. What would you recommend to do? Because there is no money. How do we implement those projects? And we've seen how much kilowatt hour costs in the United Arab Emirates. It never pays back, you know, it's too little. Приезжайте к нам. Let the Europeans pay for it.
Sergio Nagorny, partner of the international project. My question for international experts. You know that there was a Prospect Poland's initiatives in Krakow for creation Eurasia community, deal with diversification of energy resources from Caspian region to Europe through the territory of Ukraine. In your opinion, is it possible to reverse or to cooperate this country in wider Black Sea region? And my second question for Mr. Ponomarev.
After 2 years, are you still supporting your initiative to establish a dialogue between Russia and Ukraine? If so, then given the fact that the process has been distracted in Minsk, can this process move to Geneva, potentially? Well, I'm always for the dialogue and I'm always against the war. So I think it's quite obvious. If you retract my statements that I recently made, I'm still consistent and I'm very skeptical about what's going on in Minsk. I think this is an absolute cul-de-sac that is no good for Ukraine and is good not for Russia but to Putin personally. I think they are hardly doable, I mean those requirements. From the geopolitical and other alliances, again my position is well known. I think that those who are drowning have to be rescued by themselves. You can never expect any practicality from the alliances because all the actors have their own interests. I think Ukraine has enough capacity to actually at least bring its energy sector to the new quality level from the standpoint of upstream market and exports opportunities for both the natural gas and electricity. Thank you very much for your answer.